Welcome back to our designer profile series, and today we feature probably the best designer in the game, RJWils30, and his course Monte Heights. Now, Monte was an interesting project and one that I actually came up with a plot for. We're going to have a little look at that later. And it's one of his best courses, but he really is, every single course is outstanding. They're well worth a play, every single one of them. Now, what we're going to particularly look at with Rob, and you could look at pretty much everything as a strength, but in particular today we're going to look at boldness, we're going to look at green sites, which are outstanding, how you can use constraints to come up with interesting hole designs, and then as ever you can see the plot and the routing are just, the routing really to take advantage of the plot is just phenomenal. So we're going to leap in, play a few of these holes, but really they're all stellar. Give it a play. Okay, so the opening hole is a downhill par 4 that takes you from the very top corner of the plot all the way down into the middle portion where he's banked a couple of greens. Now we're going to talk about green sites. This first one perched up with an uphill approach, so you hit down to hit up, which is two very different shot values. Really wide fairway, width is not so much of an issue here, but as you come to that green you'll see it's small, it's got some interesting slopes, it's going to be tricky to find the right portion of it and get a birdie. So a tough opening hole. The best of a really strong quartet of par 5s for me is the third, and it immediately goes and breaks a rule that we've conceived about where you should angle holes. This one's a right angled dogleg, which bends massively around these trees on the inside, and the hole just keeps turning, meaning that you're playing to this green that if you haven't hit far enough you can't necessarily see. You're having to hit a shot in from a downhill cambered lie towards a green that's actually propped up into the hillside and heavily contoured. It's a really demanding approach shot, but a great green site and a really good way to get there. As with all of them, there's really good contention for which is the best par 4. My personal favourite's the 5th, which probably won't be everyone's choice, but I love the hazards off the tee. You've got the left-hand side where you've got those little framing bunkers and it's separating from the 4th fairway. On the right-hand side you've got bunkers you have to skirt really close to without running into the heavy rough on the left-hand side. But then we reach this little green side which is benched in between two small dunes with slopes that funnel the ball down towards the hole and all sorts of interesting contouring. Here, landing the ball short and running it down is a great way to access an otherwise really tucked pin. And it's just a really interesting hole. The best par 3 for my money is the 11th, and the reason for this is the environment. The hole is so closely tied in with the planting, you've got bunkers creeping out of that little ravine, and you've got an interesting green site that's defined by those bunkers in and around. It's a really short hole, it's only a flip wedge, but you've got to be so precise as well to access these pins. So having worked our way back up to the top of the plot, we now finish with the 18th, which is straight across the top. And you see those cypress trees really well featured here. Bunkers all the way down the left as a visual hazard, but that's the side you want to be on off the tee, and the land is all working you away from that. You've then got this, again, extraordinary green side perch between a fall off on the right, which is bunkered, and then two big bunkers on the left-hand side, and a green that is pretty close to demonic in terms of the back to front sloping of it. Now, one of the things I thought might be interesting in this one would be to overlay the plot that Rob inherited with what he actually produced. And that way you can see how the holes came to be from the base material that there was. So here we look over the 16th, 15th, 4th and 5th, or the land that would become those. You can see how well he works with the general environment and how little, relatively, he's actually changed of the land. As we work our way down to that bay area, you can also see how he zigzags across the elevation change. And eventually, finally, we come into that key area of the plot where he had to house 5 greens. You'll see how he's done it with 2 par 3s, 2 greens that just creep in as well, and a par 4 across the bottom. So what can you take from this and use in your own designs? Firstly, I guess the boldness has to be managed with extreme care, and chucking on giant, really wide fairways won't work for most people. Rob kind of does his own thing and does it extremely well, but there's so much intuitive understanding behind that as well. The same with the routing. We say that 90-degree doglegs generally don't work. They generally don't. But what's made this one work is the fact there's no holes on, although there are holes on the inside, you're never going to cut a path down here. It's not impeding anything else. The hole works and it makes sense. It's just not something we'd necessarily see. And it's a solution kind of born out of necessity because there was a cluster of trees you had to work around here. and here, and yet that's produced one of the best holes on the course and potentially in the game, in my opinion. In terms of looking back up to here as well, the plot limits really do force some creativity, so don't necessarily always look to reshape the land. 15 is one of the better holes on the course, in my opinion. It's a tiny short par 4 because actually you don't really have that much space to do anything more with it, so making it drivable potentially gives it some real character, and the hillside and tiny green mean that missing that is death. So it's really making the most of the land that you have available. That then allows 16 to have this sweeping downhill par 5 that again slots so nicely in and around the rest of the holes. We talked about the green sites. Well, that we can imitate. Some of them benched into hills, some of them kind of on top of one with a runoff short, some of them kind of overlooking the seas and infinity green, so very much on the top of a hill, some of them banked into the natural environment in this ravine, some of them slightly flatter. There's a variety within them, and whilst he's always looking for the best holes he can available, a lot of the ground rules of design try to vary green sites, are really well done, and that's what underpins all of this risk taking with his design. In terms of that risk taking, you'll notice so much red slope on his greens, but they're always there for a purpose and they're never entirely there to hinder. So look at this pin, you've got all of these red slopes pushing you towards it. This pin, you've got one helping. This is the hardest pin on the green, but actually it's the furthest away from any of the trouble down here. So you can usually hit the green and have a putt back up at it. This one, yeah, it's tempting fate, but you do have this backstop there to help you as well. So I think the fun and helping shot values is something that I would also try to take on this as well. I mean, we could go on and on all day. The whole designs are impeccable. The environment is great. I'd really take away from it the fun of playing them and definitely give his other courses a spin. There's not one that is anything below spectacular. I hope you enjoyed the video. See you again soon.